Your heart stops when you sneeze. There's a popular idea that when you sneeze, your heart skips a beat, or even stops entirely, for a brief moment. It's one of those strange biological facts people pass around like trivia. But the truth, your heart doesn't stop, not even close. Sneezing is a dramatic reflex. Your body builds pressure in your lungs, your eyes squeeze shut, and a blast of air shoots out at high speed. It feels intense, so it's no surprise people think something serious is happening inside. And technically, your heartbeat can change slightly. But that's not the same as stopping. Here's what actually happens. During a sneeze, there's a moment of increased pressure in your chest. That pressure can affect blood flow and briefly change your heart rate. Often, the rhythm slows down slightly due to a reflex called the vagal response. But the heart doesn't pause or halt. It simply adjusts to the temporary change in pressure. In fact, your heart changes pace all the time. It speeds up when you stand up, slows when you exhale, and responds constantly to what your body's doing. The tiny variation that happens during a sneeze is just one of many automatic adjustments. And it's completely normal. So where did this myth come from? Probably from the physical jolt of sneezing, paired with the momentary silence that follows. Some people even say, "Bless you," as if you've narrowly escaped death. But the heart-stopping idea is more dramatic than biological. Your sneeze might shake your whole body, but your heart keeps right on beating. No skip, no stop. Just another myth that sounds intense, but doesn't hold up under pressure. We use only 10% of our brain. This is one of the most well-known and completely wrong myths we hear in everyday life. The claim that we only use 10% of our brain has been around for over a century. It sounds just intuitive enough to earn a place in pop culture. But brain scans tell a very different story. When scientists use tools like fMRI to observe brain activity, they find that nearly every part of the brain is active at different times, depending on what you're doing. Simple actions like walking or listening to music engage multiple areas, and during complex tasks like solving a puzzle or recalling a memory, even more regions light up. There's no massive section of your brain sitting idle. The myth likely stuck because it's appealing. It makes us feel like we have untapped potential just waiting to be unlocked. But it's based on a misunderstanding. Some parts of the brain are more specialized, responsible for vision, movement, or language, and not all are firing at once. That doesn't mean they're unused. It just means they're used as needed. What's more, the brain is one of the most energy-hungry organs in the body. It uses around 20% of your energy, even though it weighs just 2% of your total body mass. Evolution doesn't keep around expensive, useless tissue. So no, you're not stuck with 10% power. You're already using far more than you think, just not all at once, and that's exactly how it's meant to work. Humans evolved from monkeys. The phrase "humans evolved from monkeys" gets repeated a lot, but it's not quite accurate. It oversimplifies how evolution works and leads to some common misunderstandings about human origins. Humans didn't evolve from the monkeys we see today. Instead, humans and modern monkeys share a common ancestor, a species that lived millions of years ago and gave rise to multiple evolutionary branches. One of those branches eventually led to us. Another led to the monkeys and apes still living today. Think of it like a family tree. You and your cousins didn't come from each other. You both came from a shared grandparent. In the same way, humans and other primates are more like evolutionary cousins than one being descended directly from the other. The common ancestor we share with modern monkeys was likely a small, tree-dwelling primate that lived around 25 to 30 million years ago. Over time, different populations of its descendants adapted to different environments. Some became the various types of monkeys we know today, while others evolved into apes, and one specific branch of apes eventually evolved into early humans. Fossils and genetic evidence show that humans are most closely related to chimpanzees and bonobos, but even these are not our ancestors. We share about 98 to 99% of our DNA with them, but that similarity points to a shared past, not a direct line. Human evolution is marked by gradual changes, walking upright, developing larger brains, and using tools. These traits didn't suddenly appear. They developed over millions of years in response to shifting environments and survival needs. So while humans and monkeys are connected through evolution, we didn't come from monkeys, we came from the same ancient roots. Understanding that distinction helps make sense of how all life is interconnected without confusing the direction of evolution. Lightning never strikes the same place twice. You've probably heard the saying, lightning never strikes the same place twice. It's catchy, but completely false. Lightning actually does strike the same place more than once, and it happens more often than most people realize. In fact, tall, pointed or isolated structures are frequent targets. The Empire State Building, for example, gets struck by lightning around 20 to 25 times every single year. Not just twice, dozens of times. Here's why it happens. Lightning is a discharge of electricity that travels between clouds and the ground. It looks for the fastest, easiest path. Tall objects like towers, trees, and flagpoles provide a shorter route through the air. That makes them prime targets, again and again. Lightning also tends to return to places where conditions are favorable. If something has been hit before, it likely has the right shape, height, and surroundings to attract another strike. The atmosphere doesn't care if a place has already been hit. Electricity just follows the path of least resistance. The myth probably comes from the way we use the phrase in everyday conversation. People say it to suggest that a rare event won't happen twice. But in science, rarity has nothing to do with location. If conditions are right, lightning can and will strike the same place again. This is why important buildings often have lightning rods installed at the top. These rods are specifically designed to attract lightning and safely redirect the energy into the ground. It's a controlled way to handle what nature repeats. So while the saying might sound comforting or clever, it doesn't match reality. Lightning is unpredictable in many ways, but returning to the same spot is not unusual, especially if that spot makes it easy. Opposites attract. The saying opposites attract is one of the most popular ideas about relationships. It suggests that people with contrasting personalities, like the introvert and the extrovert, or the planner and the spontaneous one, are naturally drawn to each other. But while it makes for great movie plots, research tells a different story. Psychological studies consistently show that people are more likely to form lasting relationships with others who are similar to them, not wildly different. That similarity can show up in personality, values, communication style, or life goals. It's called the similarity attraction effect, and it's been observed in friendships, romantic relationships, and even workplace dynamics. The idea that opposites attract might come from noticing how different traits can seem exciting or complementary at first. For example, someone who's shy might find a bold, outgoing partner refreshing, or a risk taker might enjoy the calm balance of a cautious partner. In the short term, those differences can feel like a good match. But over time, significant differences in how people approach life, like handling money, conflict, or parenting, can lead to tension. That doesn't mean everyone needs to be exactly alike. Relationships still benefit from a balance of perspectives, but the foundation tends to work best when partners share core traits, like openness, emotional stability, or mutual interests. These commonalities make communication easier, reduce misunderstandings, and increase long-term satisfaction. The myth that opposites attract sounds exciting because it challenges what we expect. But in reality, shared values, habits, and outlooks often matter more. Relationships built on common ground tend to be more stable, not because they lack differences, but because they're aligned where it counts. The science suggests it's not about finding your opposite. It's about finding your match. People are either left-brained or right-brained. You've probably heard that people are either left-brained or right-brained. Left-brained individuals are supposed to be logical and analytical, while right-brained people are said to be creative and intuitive. It's a neat way to explain personality, but it's not how the brain actually works. The idea comes from the fact that the brain has two hemispheres, and each does handle some tasks more than the other. Language tends to be processed more in the left hemisphere, while spatial awareness and facial recognition often lean toward the right. That part is true, but these differences don't divide people into types. In reality, the brain is highly interconnected. Both hemispheres work together constantly, communicating through a dense bundle of nerve fibers called the corpus callosum. Whether you're solving a math problem or writing a song, both sides of the brain are involved. One hemisphere might be more active during certain tasks, but that doesn't mean the other one isn't participating. Brain imaging studies have looked at this idea directly. Researchers scanned thousands of brains and found no consistent evidence that people favor one side over the other in a way that defines their personality or abilities. Someone might be artistic and also great with numbers. Traits like creativity and logic aren't locked to specific sides of the brain. The left brain, right brain myth likely stuck because it offers a simple explanation for complex behavior. But human thought, emotion, and talent are more flexible than that. Brains don't sort us into categories. They adapt, grow, and specialize based on experience, not strict hemispheric roles. So while it's true that the brain has a left and a right side, the idea that people are one or the other doesn't reflect how thinking actually happens. The mind works as a whole, not in halves. Your pupils dilate when you're attracted to someone. It's one of those romantic science facts that shows up in movies and psychology blogs. If someone's pupils dilate when they look at you, they must be into you. Attraction, desire, eye contact, all supposedly written right there in the size of the black dot in their eye. But is it really that simple? Not exactly. Yes, pupil dilation can occur when someone is aroused or emotionally stimulated. It's controlled by the autonomic nervous system, the same system that regulates your heartbeat and breathing. But attraction is just one of many triggers. Pupils also dilate in response to low light, stress, surprise, cognitive effort, or even certain medications and caffeine. In fact, your pupils are constantly adjusting to lighting conditions and internal states. If you're in a dim room or looking at a screen, your pupils might expand simply to let in more light. And if someone's thinking hard or feeling nervous, that can also cause dilation, whether they're attracted or not. The myth likely stuck around because it feels intuitive. Attraction is tied to eye contact, and pupils are part of the eyes, so the connection seems obvious. Plus, it adds a layer of hidden meaning to social interactions. But relying on pupil size to read someone's feelings is unreliable at best. Also, the changes in dilation are often subtle, fractions of a millimeter, and not easily noticeable without close observation or controlled lighting. So while pupil dilation can coincide with attraction, it's not a clear signal. It's like trying to guess someone's feelings from their pulse. May be helpful, maybe not, and definitely not conclusive. Your eyes might be windows to the soul, but your pupils, they're just doing their job. The Great Wall of China is visible from space. It's one of the most popular space-related facts people love to repeat. The Great Wall of China is the only man-made object visible from space. But that statement doesn't hold up. First, it depends on what you mean by space. If you're talking about low Earth orbit, where the International Space Station orbits, the wall is sometimes visible, but it's not easy to spot. Astronauts say it's very difficult to see with the naked eye, even under perfect lighting conditions. That's because the wall is relatively narrow, and its color blends in with the natural landscape. The idea that it stands out clearly from space came long before satellites or space travel. It dates back to early speculation, long before anyone had been above the atmosphere to check. Once astronauts actually started going into orbit, they quickly debunked the myth. From that high up, large cities, roads, and even airports are more noticeable than the Great Wall. And if you're talking about the moon, where the myth often gets exaggerated, the wall is absolutely not visible. From that distance, no man-made structure can be seen with the naked eye. Earth just looks like a blue and white sphere with continents and weather patterns, but not individual buildings or walls. This myth sticks around because it feels impressive. The Great Wall is one of the largest construction projects in history, stretching over 13,000 miles, so it's natural to assume it would be visible from high above. But in reality, visibility from space is about contrast and size, not just length, and the wall doesn't stand out enough to be seen easily from orbit. It's an incredible human achievement, but not the landmark you're spotting from space. That view belongs more to cities, highways, and bright lights than to ancient stone. Shaving makes hair grow back thicker. It's a common belief. If you shave your hair, it grows back thicker, darker, and faster. But that's not how hair works. The idea likely comes from what people notice right after shaving. When hair starts to grow back, it can feel rougher or look darker than before. But that's not because it changed. It's because of how the hair is cut. Shaving slices the hair straight across, leaving a blunt edge. That edge feels stubbly and coarse as it grows out. But the hair itself hasn't actually become thicker or denser. Hair grows from follicles under your skin, and shaving doesn't affect them. The thickness, color, and speed of your hair growth are determined by your genetics and hormones, not by your razor. Whether you're shaving your legs, face, or head, the razor is only trimming the visible part of the hair, not influencing what happens beneath the skin. The illusion of thickness also comes from the contrast between new stubble and the smoother skin around it. Freshly shaved hair hasn't yet been exposed to sunlight or natural wear, so it can appear darker too. But again, that's just appearance. It's not a real change in the hair's structure. Multiple studies have tested this idea over the years, and none have found that shaving changes hair's thickness, growth rate, or color. If it did, we'd see people with visibly thicker eyebrows, arms, or other areas after regular shaving. And we don't. So while it might feel like your hair grows back thicker, it's just a trick of texture and timing. The razor's not changing your biology, it's just giving your hair a blunt edge. You should pee on a jellyfish sting. You've probably seen it in movies or heard it from a friend. If someone gets stung by a jellyfish, the best thing you can do is pee on the wound. It sounds bizarre, but oddly plausible. After all, urine is warm, sterile, and acidic, right? But here's the truth. Peeing on a jellyfish sting can actually make things worse. Jellyfish stings come from microscopic barbs called nematocysts, which inject venom when triggered. Even after the initial sting, many of these barbs can still be active on the skin, just waiting to fire again. The wrong kind of treatment can set them off. Urine is made up of water, salts, and waste products, and its exact chemical makeup varies from person to person. In many cases, the salt concentration and temperature of urine can actually trigger more nematocysts to release venom, intensifying the pain instead of relieving it. So instead of soothing the sting, peeing on it might make the burning sensation even worse. So where did this idea come from? Probably from a misunderstanding of how acid or heat can neutralize venom in other situations. Or maybe it just stuck around because it was weird enough to remember. Either way, it doesn't hold up. The better approach? Rinse the sting with vinegar, which helps deactivate the stingers. Then use hot water, not cold, to soak the area, since heat can break down the proteins in the venom and reduce the pain. And if the sting is severe or involves a dangerous species, get medical help immediately. Peeing on someone's leg might make for a dramatic story, but it's not good first aid. The best thing you can do is reach for vinegar, not your bladder. Dogs only see in black and white. For years, people believed that dogs only see the world in black and white, like an old TV show or a faded photograph. It's a simple idea that's stuck, but it doesn't match what science has discovered about how dogs actually see. Dogs do see colour, just not in the same way humans do. Human eyes have 3 types of colour-detecting cells called cones, which let us see a wide range of colours, including red, green, and blue. Dogs have only 2 types of cones. This means their colour vision is limited compared to ours, but it's far from black and white. In practical terms, dogs see the world in shades of blue and yellow. They can tell the difference between blue and red, but red appears more like a dull brown or grey to them. Green and orange also lose their distinctiveness and tend to blend with other colours. So a bright red ball in green grass might not stand out much to a dog, but a blue one would. Researchers have tested this by training dogs to respond to different coloured lights and objects. Their responses show they can distinguish certain colours consistently, just within a smaller spectrum than humans. Dogs also rely less on colour than we do. Their vision is built more for motion and low-light conditions. They see better in the dark and detect movement more easily, which made sense for their ancestors who hunted at dawn or dusk. So while dogs don't see the full rainbow, they definitely don't live in a grayscale world. Their vision is limited compared to ours, but it's still functional and surprisingly well suited for the way they interact with their surroundings. The black and white myth just doesn't hold up under the lens of modern science. Reading in dim light ruins your eyes. At some point, almost everyone's been told not to read in dim light because it will ruin their eyes. It sounds reasonable. Squinting at a book under a weak lamp feels uncomfortable. But while it might cause temporary strain, it doesn't cause permanent damage. When you read in low light, your eyes work harder to focus. That can lead to symptoms like dryness, tiredness, or mild headaches. But these effects are short-term. They don't reshape your eyes or alter your vision in any lasting way. Once you rest your eyes or move to better lighting, those symptoms fade. The idea that dim lighting permanently harms your vision has been around for generations. It likely started when eye strain was poorly understood, and people assumed that discomfort meant damage. But modern research shows that your eyes are more adaptable than they seem. They constantly adjust to different levels of brightness without injury. Even in low light, your pupils widen to let in more light, and other muscles subtly shift to help you focus. These adjustments are natural, and while they may lead to fatigue over time, they're not dangerous. It's similar to how your legs might get sore from walking a long distance. It's effort, not harm. That said, good lighting still helps. It can reduce eye fatigue and make reading more comfortable, especially for long periods. But choosing to read a few chapters in bed with a soft lamp won't ruin your eyes. So while dim lighting might make your eyes work harder for a while, it doesn't leave a mark. It's more about comfort than damage. Your vision isn't at risk from that bedtime novel under a warm bedside glow. Touching a baby bird makes the mother abandon it. It's something many people are told as kids. If you touch a baby bird, the mother will smell your scent and abandon it. It's meant to protect the animal, but the science doesn't back it up. Most birds have a very limited sense of smell. They don't rely on scent to recognize their chicks. Instead, they use sight, sound, and location. So even if a human touches a baby bird, the parents aren't likely to notice, let alone reject it because of it. The myth probably started as a way to keep children from interfering with wildlife. Baby birds found on the ground often look helpless, and people assume they've been abandoned. But, in many cases, the bird is a fledgling, old enough to leave the nest, but still learning to fly. The parents are usually nearby, keeping watch and continuing to feed it. Even in situations where a nestling, a younger chick not yet ready to leave the nest, falls or is disturbed, returning it to the nest is usually safe. Most bird species will continue caring for their young, even after brief human contact. Their parental instincts are strong, and they won't walk away from their chicks just because something smells unfamiliar. Still, handling baby birds should be kept to a minimum, not because of scent rejection, but to avoid unnecessary stress or injury. If you do find a grounded fledgling, the best thing to do is often to leave it alone unless it's clearly in danger. If you're unsure, contacting a local wildlife rehab center is a better choice than acting on old advice. Birds may seem fragile, but they're not easily fooled by a touch. The idea that a single interaction will make a parent give up on its chick is a myth, not how nature works. You lose most of your heat through your head. You've probably heard that you lose most of your body heat through your head. It's the kind of advice that shows up in winter. Wear a hat, or you'll freeze. But the truth is, that idea isn't supported by how the body actually works. Heat loss happens through any part of the body that's exposed. If you go outside with only your head uncovered, then yes, you'll lose more heat through your head. But that's because the rest of you is bundled up. It's not that your head is some kind of special heat vent. It's just the part that's left unprotected. The myth likely started with a military study from the 1950s, where volunteers wore cold weather gear that covered everything except their heads. Naturally, most heat loss occurred there. But under normal conditions, the head only accounts for about 7 to 10% of your body's surface area. That means it contributes about the same percentage to total heat loss, unless it's the only part exposed. What makes the head feel more important is how sensitive it is. You're more likely to notice temperature changes on your face or scalp. It also doesn't have much fat insulation, and blood vessels run close to the skin, so it can cool down quickly, giving the impression that it's where the heat escapes first. Still, if you went out wearing just shorts and a hat, you'd lose far more heat from your arms and legs than from your head. The key factor isn't the body part, it's what's covered and what's not. So while wearing a hat in winter is still a good idea, it's not because your head leaks most of your body heat. It's just another piece of the puzzle, like sleeves, gloves, and everything else. Brown eggs are more nutritious than white. At the grocery store, brown eggs often sit next to white eggs with a higher price tag, and a common belief that they're healthier. Many people assume brown eggs must be more natural, more nutritious, or just better overall. But the colour of an eggshell doesn't tell you anything about what's inside. The only real difference between brown and white eggs is the breed of the hen that laid them. White feathered hens with white earlobes typically lay white eggs. Brown feathered hens with red earlobes lay brown eggs. That's it. It's a genetic trait, like eye color in humans, not a sign of quality or nutrition. Nutritionally, brown and white eggs are nearly identical. They contain the same amounts of protein, fat, vitamins, and minerals, assuming the hens are raised under similar conditions. The real nutritional differences come from the hen's diet and environment. For example, hens fed omega-3 rich diets will produce eggs with more omega-3s, regardless of shell color. So why are brown eggs more expensive? It's not because they're better for you. Brown egg-laying hens are often larger and require more feed. That added cost is passed along to the consumer, not because the eggs are healthier, but because the hens are more expensive to raise. The brown versus white egg myth sticks around because it feels intuitive. Brown rice is considered healthier than white rice. Whole wheat bread is often preferred over white. So it's easy to assume the same rule applies to eggs. But in this case, the shell color doesn't reflect the nutrition inside. When choosing eggs, the important factors are how the hens are raised and what they're fed, not the shade of the shell. Whether brown or white, an egg is an egg, and the color doesn't change the contents. Bats are blind. The phrase blind as a bat gets thrown around all the time, but it couldn't be more wrong. Bats aren't blind. In fact, many of them see surprisingly well. Bats belong to a large and diverse group of mammals, and different species have different types of vision. Some bats, especially fruit bats, have excellent eyesight. These bats are active during twilight or nighttime hours, and they rely on their vision to find fruit, navigate trees, and avoid obstacles. Their large eyes help them see in low light, similar to how a cat's eyes work. Other bats, like many insect-eating species, also have functioning eyes, but they rely more heavily on a system called echolocation. This is a kind of biological sonar. The bat sends out high-pitched sounds and listens for the echoes bouncing off objects around them. This allows them to see with sound, detecting tiny insects in complete darkness with incredible accuracy. But this doesn't mean they can't see. Their eyes are still working, they're just not the primary tool they use for hunting. The myth likely stuck because echolocation is such a strange and impressive ability. People assumed that if bats were using sound to navigate, it must mean their eyes don't work. But evolution doesn't tend to get rid of useful features. Bats have both systems, vision and echolocation, and they use whichever works best depending on the situation. Even among the echolocating bats, many can detect shapes, movement, and even ultraviolet light. They might not see the world the way humans do, but that's not the same as being blind. So the next time someone uses the phrase blind as a bat, it's worth remembering that bats aren't flying around in total darkness. They're navigating with a full set of tools, and vision is definitely one of them. Different tongue areas taste different flavors. If you've ever seen a diagram of the tongue in a textbook, you might remember it. Sweet at the tip, salty on the sides, bitter in the back, sour somewhere in between. It's called the tongue map, and it's been printed, taught, and memorized for decades. But here's the twist. It's wrong. The idea that different parts of the tongue detect different tastes comes from a misinterpretation of a study from the early 1900s. A German scientist published research showing small differences in sensitivity across the tongue. But when the data was translated and simplified for teaching, it turned into something much more rigid. A literal map that assigned each taste to a specific region. That oversimplification became the myth we all grew up with. In reality, all taste buds can detect all 5 basic tastes: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami. These taste buds are spread throughout the tongue, and even in other parts of the mouth and throat. While some areas might be slightly more sensitive to a certain flavor, the differences are tiny. Your whole tongue is working together to detect taste. Modern neuroscience confirms this. Taste is a complex experience. It's not just about the tongue. It involves smell, texture, temperature, and even expectations. The tongue map might look tidy in a diagram, but it doesn't match how your brain processes flavor. So the next time someone points to the tip of their tongue and says, "That's where sweet lives," you'll know better. Taste isn't divided up like territories. It's a full mouth, full sense experience, far messier and far more interesting than any old map suggests. Tilting your head back stops a nosebleed. Tilting your head back during a nosebleed doesn't stop the bleeding, it just redirects it. Instead of blood coming out your nose, it flows down the back of your throat. You might not see it, but you're swallowing it. And that can lead to nausea, stomach irritation, and even vomiting. In rare cases, it can also affect your breathing if too much blood pools near the airway. The better move: sit up straight, tilt your head slightly forward, and pinch the soft part of your nose, just below the bridge. Hold it for about 10 to 15 minutes without letting go. This pressure helps seal the broken blood vessels and gives them time to clot. Breathing through your mouth during this time can help you stay calm and steady. Most nosebleeds are harmless and stop on their own with the right care. They're often caused by dry air, allergies, nose picking, or minor irritation. But the old myth of tilting your head back has lingered for generations, passed around like a trusted first aid tip, even though medical experts now strongly advise against it. So next time you or someone else gets a nosebleed, forget the backward lean. Lean forward, apply pressure, and let gravity help, not hurt, the process. It's a small change in posture that makes a big difference in how your body heals. You must drink 8 glasses of water a day. Drink 8 glasses of water a day. It's one of the most common health tips out there, repeated by doctors, trainers, and wellness blogs alike. But it turns out it's more of a guideline than a strict rule. The 8 glasses idea likely came from a general estimate that adults need around 2 litres of water per day. But that includes all sources of hydration, not just plain water. Food, coffee, tea, juice, and other beverages all contribute to your daily fluid intake. Even fruits and vegetables like cucumbers, oranges, and lettuce are mostly water. How much water a person needs actually depends on a variety of factors: body size, activity level, climate, and diet. Someone running in hot weather will need more water than someone sitting indoors all day. And if you eat a lot of high water content foods, you may naturally drink less. The body is also very good at telling you when it needs fluids. Thirst is a built-in system, not a sign that you've already failed. As long as you're listening to your body and your urine is pale yellow, you're probably well hydrated. It's also worth noting that drinking too much water can cause problems. Overhydration, or water intoxication, can dilute sodium levels in the blood and lead to serious health issues, especially if large amounts are consumed in a short time. The 8 glasses a day rule is simple and easy to remember, which is why it's stuck. But it's not a one-size-fits-all prescription. Most people get enough water just by drinking when they're thirsty and eating a balanced diet. Forcing down glass after glass of plain water isn't necessary for most healthy adults. Hydration matters, but the number 8 isn't magic. Cracking your knuckles causes arthritis. Knuckle cracking happens when you stretch or bend your fingers in a way that changes the pressure in your joints. Inside those joints is a fluid that helps reduce friction. When you move the joint suddenly, that pressure change causes gases in the fluid to form bubbles. The popping sound is just those bubbles collapsing or bursting, not bones grinding or ligaments snapping. The myth likely exists because the sound is sharp and unpleasant. It feels like you're doing something damaging, but the action doesn't harm the joint. Researchers have looked at this for decades. One of the most well-known informal studies involved a doctor who cracked the knuckles on one hand for over 60 years and left the other hand alone. Neither hand developed arthritis. More formal studies have confirmed similar results. There's no significant difference in arthritis rates between people who crack their knuckles regularly and those who don't. That said, knuckle cracking can sometimes cause temporary swelling or reduce grip strength, but these effects aren't permanent, and they're not the same thing as arthritis. Arthritis is a condition where the joints become inflamed, often due to wear and tear or autoimmune issues. It doesn't come from popping your knuckles. It comes from much deeper biological processes that have nothing to do with joint pressure changes. So while knuckle cracking might annoy the people around you, it's not damaging your joints the way people think. That pop is harmless gas, not the start of something serious. Goldfish have 3-second memories. The idea that goldfish only have a 3-second memory gets repeated so often, it's practically become a joke. But it's not true. Not even close. Goldfish aren't forgetful little swimmers with no sense of time. In fact, their memory span is much longer than a few seconds. It can last for weeks, and in some cases, even months. Scientists have tested this using simple but effective methods, often involving food. In one experiment, researchers trained goldfish to expect food in a specific part of their tank at the sound of a buzzer. Not only did the fish swim to that spot every time they heard the sound, but they also continued to do it long after the training stopped. That doesn't happen with a 3-second memory. That's learned behavior, and it sticks. Goldfish have even been trained to navigate mazes, recognize patterns, and remember routines. Pet owners often notice that their goldfish will swim to the top of the tank when it's feeding time or react differently to different people. These are signs of memory and basic learning ability. The myth likely stuck around because goldfish aren't expressive animals. They don't wag tails or make noise, so we tend to assume they're simple or unaware. But memory isn't about facial expressions. It's about patterns of behavior over time. And goldfish clearly have those. Memory also helps goldfish survive. In the wild, they use it to avoid predators, find food, and recognize changes in their environment. Even in a tank, their memory helps them adjust to daily routines and repeated cues. So while it's funny to imagine a fish forgetting everything every few seconds, the science shows that goldfish are more capable than we give them credit for. Their memory isn't short, it's surprisingly smart. You can't get pregnant during your period. Many people believe that having sex during a period is a free pass to avoid pregnancy. It seems logical. After all, menstruation usually signals that you're not ovulating. But this idea isn't foolproof, and it overlooks how unpredictable the human body can be. Pregnancy happens when sperm fertilizes an egg. Ovulation, the release of that egg, typically occurs around the middle of the menstrual cycle. So in a standard 28-day cycle, ovulation usually happens around day 14, while menstruation happens at the beginning. Based on that schedule, the chance of pregnancy during a period seems low. But here's the catch. Not everyone has a textbook cycle. Some people have shorter cycles, irregular timing, or ovulate earlier than expected. If someone ovulates early, say around day 10, and has sex during their period, which could be around day 5 or 6, sperm could still be alive when the egg is released. That's because sperm can survive in the reproductive tract for up to 5 days. There's also the issue of misidentifying bleeding. Sometimes, spotting from ovulation or irregular cycles can be mistaken for a period. If someone has sex thinking they're menstruating, but they're actually close to ovulation, the chances of pregnancy increase. It's not likely to get pregnant during a period, but it's definitely possible, especially for people with irregular cycles or shorter gaps between menstruation and ovulation. And relying on timing alone is never a reliable method of birth control. The belief that periods provide total protection is based on an oversimplified view of how the menstrual cycle works. In reality, the body doesn't always follow the calendar. Fertility windows can shift, and sperm have more staying power than most people realize. Timing reduces the odds, but it doesn't eliminate the risk. 5-second food rule. You drop a cookie on the floor, you glance around, count to 5, and pick it up. 5-second rule, you say, as if those few seconds somehow protect it from germs. It's a rule everyone seems to know, and most people secretly follow. But scientifically, it doesn't hold up. The idea behind the 5-second rule is simple. If food touches the floor for less than 5 seconds, it's still safe to eat. The assumption is that bacteria need time to crawl, to jump, to somehow transfer. But in reality, contamination is almost instant. Studies have shown that bacteria can transfer to food in less than a second, especially if the surface is dirty or moist. The type of food matters too. A cracker might pick up fewer microbes than a slice of watermelon, but both still get contaminated the moment they touch a germy surface. And it's not just about time, it's about what's already on the floor. If the floor is clean, the risk is low, no matter how long the food sits. But if it's teeming with bacteria, 5 seconds makes no difference. Germs don't need to warm up. They're already there. So where did the rule come from? It's not clear. Some trace it back to an old joke or a loose cultural idea that got passed around. Over time, it became a comforting way to justify eating something you really didn't want to throw away. It feels like a loophole, science-ish enough to believe, harmless enough to repeat. But while your immune system can handle a lot, the 5-second rule is a myth. Bacteria don't carry stopwatches. They don't wait. If it hits the floor, it's a gamble, no matter how fast you are. Sugar makes kids hyper. Parents have been blaming sugar for hyperactive kids for decades. Birthday parties, Halloween, or a piece of cake after dinner. It's often followed by the idea that sugar made them bounce off the walls, but research doesn't support that claim. Multiple scientific studies have tested whether sugar causes hyperactivity in children. The results have been surprisingly consistent. There's no measurable link between sugar intake and increased activity levels. Even in studies where kids were given large amounts of sugar, their behavior didn't change compared to those given a placebo. In some experiments, the only difference was what the parents believed their kids had eaten. That belief plays a big role. If a parent expects sugar to make their child hyper, they're more likely to interpret normal excitement as over-the-top behavior. This is called the expectancy effect, where perception is shaped by what someone expects to see. Kids often get sugar during exciting events, like parties, holidays, or playdates. These settings naturally lead to more energy, running around, and loud voices. Sugar just happens to be there at the same time. It's easy to assume a cause and effect, even when there isn't one. Now, this doesn't mean sugar is harmless. Too much can affect things like mood, focus, and energy crashes later on. It can also contribute to long-term health issues if overconsumed. But in the short term, it doesn't seem to trigger a spike in hyperactivity. Still, the myth persists, partly because it's been repeated so often. and partly because it feels like a neat explanation for behavior that's otherwise hard to manage. But scientifically, sugar doesn't cause kids to lose control. The excitement usually comes from what's going on around them, not what's in their snack. Brain is just a computer. The brain is often compared to a computer. It's a neat analogy. Input, process, output make sense on the surface. But once you look closer, the comparison starts to fall apart. Computers follow fixed instructions. Every line of code tells the machine exactly what to do. But the human brain doesn't operate with clean lines of logic. It's messy, adaptive, and constantly rewiring itself. Two people can get the same input, a sentence, a sound, a smell, and react in completely different ways. That's not how machines work. Computers store data exactly as it was entered. Your vacation photo looks the same 10 years later. But your brain, it reshapes memories every time you recall them. Details blur, emotions shift, sometimes whole parts get rewritten. If the brain were a hard drive, it would be the most unreliable storage system in the world. But that's actually part of what makes it powerful. Another key difference: computers don't feel. They don't get tired, bored, anxious, or inspired. The brain is affected by hormones, body signals, sleep, social cues, things that aren't part of any software system. Emotions aren't just noise in the machine. They help guide decisions and learning. In fact, damage to emotional centers in the brain often makes rational thinking worse, not better. Even the structure is different. Computers have centralized processors, but the brain is a network. Millions of neurons firing in patterns with no single command center running the show. The brain equals computer myth simplifies something far more complex. It's useful in conversation, but not in science. The truth is, your brain isn't like a computer. It's more like an orchestra, coordinated, unpredictable, emotional, and alive. And no two are wired exactly the same. You can sweat out toxins. It's a popular idea. Sit in a sauna, go for a long run, or do hot yoga, and you'll sweat out the toxins in your body. It sounds appealing, but that's not how the human body works. Sweat is your body's natural cooling system. When your internal temperature rises, your sweat glands release fluid, mostly water, with small amounts of salt, urea, and electrolytes. It helps regulate heat, not remove harmful substances. The idea that sweating can flush out toxins is a misunderstanding of what sweat is actually for. Toxins, like alcohol, drugs, or byproducts from food, are filtered by your liver and kidneys. These organs break down waste and send it out through urine or stool. That's their job. Sweat plays only a tiny, almost negligible role in removing waste. If your body relied on sweat to detox, you'd be in serious trouble. Some people feel better after sweating, especially during exercise. That's real, but it's more about the release of endorphins, improved circulation, and the psychological effects of physical effort, not the elimination of toxins through your skin. Medical studies have shown that even in extreme conditions, sweat contains only trace amounts of anything toxic. You'd have to sweat gallons to even approach what your kidneys clear in a single bathroom break. And for people with kidney or liver problems, sweating doesn't offer a backup plan. The body still relies on its internal filtration systems. That doesn't mean sweating is bad. It's a healthy part of how your body maintains balance. But it's not a detox method. If you're looking to support your body's natural detox process, drinking enough water, eating well, and getting regular sleep does far more than any amount of sweating ever will. You swallow 8 spiders a year in your sleep. At some point, You've probably heard the claim that people swallow about 8 spiders a year in their sleep. It sounds gross, a little creepy, and completely made up. There's no scientific evidence behind the idea. It didn't come from a research study or a medical report. In fact, it likely started as an example of how easily misinformation can spread. Someone invented the claim to show that people will believe almost anything if it's repeated enough. Ironically, the myth became more famous than the point it was trying to prove. But beyond its origin, the idea doesn't hold up for several simple reasons. First, humans don't sleep with their mouths wide open for long periods, and even if they did, the vibrations from breathing, snoring, and slight movements would likely scare a spider away, not draw it in. Spiders are generally cautious creatures. They don't go wandering into places with warm, noisy air and unpredictable motion. Second, most spiders want nothing to do with humans. They're not curious about our mouths. They prefer quiet, hidden corners where they won't be disturbed. The idea that a spider would walk across your face, down into your mouth, and just wait there to be swallowed goes against how they behave. Also, people tend to wake up when something touches their face, especially something light and ticklish like a spider. Even in deep sleep, the brain stays alert to certain kinds of sensory input. No reputable entomologist, someone who studies insects and spiders, believes this myth is real. It's just a piece of trivia that sounds unsettling enough to stick in your head. But there's no need to worry. Your sleep isn't a spider buffet. It's just another myth that spread because it felt too weird to ignore. Microwaves give you cancer. Some people worry that using a microwave could increase their risk of cancer. It's a common fear, usually based on the idea that microwave ovens use radiation, and radiation sounds dangerous. But not all radiation is the same. Microwaves work by using a type of non-ionizing radiation. That means it doesn't have enough energy to damage your DNA, which is the main way cancer starts. Instead, microwave radiation causes water molecules in food to vibrate, generating heat and warming the food from the inside out. It doesn't make the food radioactive, and it doesn't change the structure of the ingredients in a harmful way. The confusion often comes from mixing up different kinds of radiation. Ionizing radiation, like X-rays or ultraviolet light, can damage cells and DNA. But the kind used in microwave ovens is much weaker and not in the same category. It's closer to the radio waves that power your phone or Wi-Fi than anything harmful. Microwaves are also designed with safety in mind. The metal casing and mesh screen on the door prevent radiation from leaking out. As long as the microwave is working properly and the door seals correctly, there's no risk of exposure beyond the inside of the oven. Claims about microwaved food being less nutritious have also been studied. Cooking in a microwave may actually help preserve some nutrients better than boiling or frying, simply because it cooks food faster and uses less water. So while the word radiation can sound alarming, the kind used in microwaves isn't the dangerous type. It heats your food efficiently and safely, without increasing your cancer risk. The technology may feel a little mysterious, but it's well understood and widely tested. Antibiotics kill all germs in your body. When you're sick and prescribed antibiotics, it's easy to think of them as all-purpose germ killers, like microscopic exterminators wiping out every harmful bug in your system. But the truth is more complicated. Antibiotics don't kill all germs, and they definitely don't work on everything. For starters, antibiotics only work against bacteria, not viruses. That means if you've got the flu, a cold, or COVID-19, antibiotics won't help. These illnesses are caused by viruses, and taking antibiotics for them won't make you better. In fact, it can do more harm than good. But even when fighting a real bacterial infection, antibiotics aren't surgical in their precision. They don't just target the bad bacteria making you sick. They also wipe out helpful bacteria your body depends on. Your gut, for example, is full of good microbes that help with digestion, immunity, and overall balance. A course of antibiotics can disrupt that ecosystem, leading to side effects like stomach issues or yeast infections. And not all bacteria are affected equally. Some are naturally resistant, and others evolve to survive antibiotic attacks, especially if medications are overused or misused. This leads to antibiotic resistance, where infections become harder to treat over time because the bacteria adapt. The myth that antibiotics kill all germs sounds like strength. A total reset for your system, but it's misleading. These drugs are powerful, yes, but specific, and they come with trade-offs. So the next time someone says antibiotics will clear out everything, it's worth remembering, not all germs are bad, and not all germs can be killed that easily. Use antibiotics wisely, because the more you understand them, the better they work. Macs can't get viruses. For years, Apple users have heard one simple message: Macs don't get viruses. It's a comforting idea, especially compared to the long history of pop-ups, malware, and system crashes on older Windows machines. But the claim isn't entirely accurate. Macs can get viruses. They're just less likely to, for a few reasons. First, macOS is built on a Unix-based system, which includes built-in security features like file permissions and sandboxing. These features make it harder for unauthorized software to make system-wide changes. Second, for a long time, Macs made up a much smaller share of the computer market. That meant fewer people were targeting them. Malware creators tend to go where the numbers are, and Windows was the bigger target. Fewer users meant fewer incentives to build Mac-specific viruses. But as Apple's popularity grew, so did the interest from hackers. Malware, phishing attacks, and other threats are no longer rare in the Mac world. In fact, some types of threats, like adware and social engineering scams, are platform neutral. They rely less on the operating system and more on tricking the user into clicking something they shouldn't. Another misconception is that viruses are the only thing to worry about. In reality, most modern threats aren't viruses in the traditional sense. They're Trojans, spyware, ransomware, or unwanted applications that sneak in through downloads or fake updates. And Macs are not immune to those. That's why even Mac users are encouraged to update their systems regularly, avoid suspicious links, and use basic security practices. Antivirus software isn't always necessary for every user, but the idea that Macs are completely safe by design is outdated. No computer is invincible. Macs are secure, but not untouchable. Organic food is always healthier. A lot of people assume that organic food is always the healthier choice. It sounds straightforward. Fewer chemicals, more natural growing methods, better for your body. But the reality is more complex than a simple label. Organic food is defined by how it's produced. That usually means no synthetic pesticides, no artificial fertilizers, no genetically modified organisms, and often stricter animal welfare standards. These rules apply to how the food is grown or raised, not necessarily to the final nutritional content. When it comes to vitamins and minerals, studies have shown that organic and conventional foods are generally very similar. An organic apple doesn't have significantly more vitamin C than a non-organic one. In some cases, organic produce may have slightly higher antioxidant levels, but the difference isn't dramatic, and it doesn't apply across the board. What organic food does tend to offer is lower pesticide residue. But even conventionally grown foods are subject to safety limits set by health agencies, and most pesticide levels found on grocery store produce fall well below those limits. Washing fruits and vegetables helps reduce residue even further, no matter how they're grown. It's also worth noting that the word organic doesn't automatically mean healthy. Organic cookies, chips, and sodas still contain sugar, fat, and salt. The ingredients may be organically sourced, but the end product can still be highly processed. There are also environmental and ethical reasons why some people choose organic. But if the goal is better nutrition, the bigger impact usually comes from what you eat. More fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and lean proteins, not whether they're labeled organic. So while organic food can be part of a healthy diet, it's not a guarantee of better nutrition. The health value depends more on overall eating habits than on a single label. Eating before bed makes you fat. A lot of people believe that eating right before bed automatically leads to weight gain. It sounds logical. Eat, lie down, and let the calories turn straight into fat. But the truth isn't that simple. Weight gain doesn't depend on the time of day you eat. It depends on how much you eat over time compared to how much energy your body uses. In other words, your total calorie intake matters more than the clock. When you eat something, your body starts digesting it immediately, whether it's 8 a.m. or 10 p.m. Your metabolism doesn't suddenly shut down when you go to sleep. It may slow slightly, but it still processes food efficiently overnight. So where did the myth come from? Part of it may be behavioral. Late-night eating often includes snacks that are higher in sugar, salt, or fat, like chips, cookies, or fast food. These are easy to overeat, especially if you're tired or distracted. It's not the timing, it's the extra calories that make the difference. Some studies have shown a connection between late-night eating and weight gain, but usually in people who consistently overeat at night. For example, skipping meals during the day, then binging before bed. That kind of pattern can throw off hunger cues and lead to long-term overeating. There's also the sleep angle. Eating too close to bedtime can affect sleep quality for some people, especially if the meal is large or spicy. Poor sleep can, in turn, affect hormone levels that regulate hunger, and that can influence weight gain indirectly. But the food itself? It doesn't know what time it is. Your body doesn't store calories differently just because the sun went down. It's about what and how much you eat overall, not when you eat it. Carrots improve night vision. The idea that carrots improve night vision has been around for generations. Parents say it, cartoons repeat it, and it sounds just believable enough to stick. But while carrots are healthy, they won't turn you into a superhero who can see in the dark. Carrots contain beta-carotene, which the body converts into vitamin A. Vitamin A is essential for maintaining healthy vision, particularly a part of the eye called the retina. Within the retina are light-sensitive cells that help us see in low-light conditions. Without enough vitamin A, those cells can't function properly, and night vision gets worse. So, in that sense, carrots do support vision, up to a point. If someone has a vitamin A deficiency, eating more carrots can help restore normal eyesight, including in the dark. But if your vitamin A levels are already normal, eating extra carrots won't give you enhanced night vision. There's a limit to how much the body can use. The myth gained extra traction during World War II. The British Royal Air Force spread the story that their pilots ate a lot of carrots to help them spot enemy planes at night. In reality, the military had developed radar technology but didn't want to reveal it. The carrot story worked as a convenient cover, and it stuck. Carrots are still great for you. They're full of nutrients, low in calories, and good for your overall health. But they won't give you special abilities in the dark. Once your body has what it needs, the rest just gets stored or flushed out. The real key to seeing well at night isn't eating more carrots. It's making sure your eyes are healthy overall, and avoiding bright lights before bed doesn't hurt either. Sitting too close to the TV ruins your eyes. For decades, kids have been told not to sit too close to the television because it'll ruin their eyes. It's the kind of warning that's stuck, passed down from living rooms to classrooms like a household rule. But medically, it doesn't hold up. There's no evidence that sitting close to a screen causes permanent eye damage. The idea likely started in the 1960s, when some early colour TVs emitted higher levels of radiation than they should have. That problem was quickly corrected, but the warning stuck around long after the technology improved. Today's screens, whether televisions, tablets or monitors, are built to be safe, even up close. What sitting too close can cause is temporary eye strain. Your eyes have to work harder to focus, especially if you're staring at one area for a long time. That can lead to headaches, dry eyes or fatigue, but it doesn't damage the eye itself. Kids often sit close to screens not because they're damaging their vision, but because their eyes naturally focus better up close. In some cases, if a child always sits close, it might be a sign they're nearsighted. But the screen isn't causing the problem. It's just revealing it. Eye strain can happen at any distance if you're not taking breaks. The 20-20-20 rule helps. Every 20 minutes, look at something 20 feet away for at least 20 seconds. It gives your eyes time to reset and relax. So, while it's more comfortable to sit at a reasonable distance, especially with a large screen, you're not hurting your eyes by sitting too close. The discomfort is real, but the damage is a myth. The key is balance, not fear of proximity. MSG is bad for you. MSG has a reputation. For years, people have blamed it for headaches, dizziness, and all kinds of unpleasant symptoms. It's been called unhealthy, unnatural, and even dangerous. But the science doesn't support that image. MSG stands for monosodium glutamate. It's a flavor enhancer that gives food a savory taste called umami, the same taste found naturally in tomatoes, cheese, mushrooms, and meat. MSG is made by fermenting starch or sugar, and chemically, it's almost identical to glutamate, an amino acid your body already uses every day. The fear around MSG began in the 1960s after a letter to a medical journal described something called Chinese restaurant syndrome. The author claimed to feel sick after eating Chinese food and pointed the finger at MSG. The idea took off, but it wasn't based on solid research. Since then, MSG has been studied extensively. Large controlled studies have found no consistent link between MSG and health problems in the general population. Some people may be sensitive to very high doses on an empty stomach, but those levels are far beyond what's found in normal food. Regulatory agencies around the world, including the FDA, the WHO, and the European Food Safety Authority, all consider MSG safe. The myth stuck partly because it sounded scientific and partly because it was repeated for years. It also fed into cultural bias, especially toward Asian cuisine, despite the fact that MSG is used in snacks, canned soups, frozen meals, and fast food across all kinds of cuisines. MSG isn't a mystery chemical. It's a well-understood food additive that adds flavor without adding fat or sugar. For most people, it's no more harmful than the salt on your fries or the glutamate in a ripe tomato. The bad reputation just never caught up to the facts. You can't fold paper more than 7 times. It's one of those oddly specific rules you probably heard in school. You can't fold a piece of paper in half more than 7 times. Doesn't matter how hard you try, 7 is the limit. But while this myth sounds mathematical, it's not a law of physics. It's just a challenge of scale. The myth likely started because, with a standard sheet of paper, folding gets hard fast. Each fold doubles the thickness and shrinks the usable area. By the 7th fold, you're pushing against a dense, stiff wedge of layered paper. So for a regular sheet, yes, it feels impossible. But that doesn't mean it is impossible. In 2002, a high school student named Brittany Gallivan actually broke the myth. She used a long roll of thin toilet paper and folded it 12 times in one direction, and did the math to prove exactly how and why it worked. Her formula showed that it's not about the number 7, it's about the ratio of thickness to length. So why do most people still believe the 7-fold rule? Because with normal paper, it's practically true. The paper gets too thick, too fast, and our hands aren't strong enough. But with thinner material, or industrial tools, the fold count climbs quickly. In fact, machines have folded paper dozens of times in laboratory conditions. This myth sticks because it blends challenge with mystery. It feels like a limit you can almost beat, but never quite do. The truth is, paper folding isn't bound by some cosmic rule, just by space, thickness, and effort. So no, 7 isn't the magic number. With the right paper and enough patience, you can fold far beyond that limit. 1 crease at a time. Camels store water in their humps. Camels are known for surviving long stretches in the desert without water. And for most people, the explanation is simple. They store water in their humps. But that's not how their humps actually work. A camel's hump doesn't hold water, it holds fat. The fat acts as an energy reserve, allowing the camel to go for long periods without food, sometimes for weeks. This adaptation helps camels survive in environments where food is scarce and inconsistent. So where does the water story come from? Probably from the fact that camels are incredibly good at conserving water, but not by carrying it in their humps. Instead, their entire body is designed to use water as efficiently as possible. Their kidneys produce very concentrated urine, and their bodies can tolerate higher levels of dehydration than most other mammals. Even their noses are built to trap moisture from exhaled air, reducing how much water they lose with every breath. Camels can also rehydrate extremely quickly. After a period without water, a thirsty camel can drink up to 40 gallons in one sitting. Their red blood cells are oval-shaped rather than round, which helps their blood flow smoothly, even when water is scarce, and allows their bodies to absorb water faster when it becomes available. The fat in the hump also plays a secondary role in water regulation. When the fat is metabolized for energy, one of the byproducts is water. So while the hump doesn't directly store water, it does indirectly help the camel make the most of what it has. The image of a hump full of water is a convenient myth, but the real story is even more impressive. Camels survive the desert not by storing water in one spot, but by managing every drop through a highly adapted system. Chewing gum stays in your stomach for 7 years. Almost every kid hears the same warning. Don't swallow your gum, it'll stay in your stomach for 7 years. It sounds serious enough to stick in your mind, but it's not true. Chewing gum is made of a gum base that your body can't digest. That part is true. Unlike most foods, the gum base doesn't break down in your stomach. But that doesn't mean it stays there for years. Like any other indigestible material, gum moves through your digestive system and eventually exits the body, usually within a few days. Your digestive system is designed to keep things moving. Muscles in your stomach and intestines work together to push food, and anything else you swallow, through the digestive tract. Gum doesn't get special treatment. It passes through just like the bits of corn, seeds, or small fibers your body can't fully digest. The 7-year myth likely started as a way to scare kids into not swallowing gum. And while swallowing gum occasionally isn't harmful, doing it often or in large amounts can potentially cause problems, especially in children. In rare cases, large amounts of swallowed gum can contribute to blockages in the digestive system, particularly if it's swallowed along with other indigestible items. But that's the exception, not the rule. For most people, a swallowed piece of gum is harmless. It goes in, it comes out, not 7 years later, but usually within a matter of days. So while it's not something to make a habit of, swallowing gum won't turn your stomach into a sticky time capsule. The human body has its limits, but it's a lot more efficient than that old playground rumor gives it credit for. Gum may be tough, but it doesn't beat your digestive system. You must stretch before working out. You've probably heard it before. Don't even think about hitting the gym unless you've stretched first. For years, it's been treated as common sense. Stretching, we're told, is the go-to way to avoid injuries and loosen up your muscles before a workout. But that advice leaves out an important detail. Not all stretching is the same, and not all of it is helpful before exercise. The idea usually refers to static stretching, the kind where you hold a muscle in a fixed position for 20 to 30 seconds. Think reaching for your toes or pulling your arm across your chest and holding it. While this type of stretching can improve flexibility over time, doing it cold, before a workout, might not be the best choice. In fact, research shows that static stretching before exercise can temporarily reduce muscle strength and performance, especially for high-intensity activities like sprinting or lifting. Instead, dynamic stretching is what actually prepares your body to move. This involves controlled, active movements that warm up your muscles and increase your range of motion. Leg swings, arm circles, walking lunges. These mimic the types of motions your workout will demand. They get your blood flowing and your muscles ready to work. That's not to say static stretching has no place. It's useful after a workout, when your muscles are warm and more receptive to flexibility gains. But when it comes to getting your body ready to perform, dynamic movement tends to be more effective and better aligned with what your muscles need in the moment. So while the message to stretch before exercise isn't entirely wrong, it's incomplete. What really matters is how you stretch and when. Your fingerprints are completely unique. For over a century, fingerprints have been treated like biological snowflakes, completely unique, impossible to duplicate, and foolproof for identification. It's why they're used in police work, passports, phones, and locks. But the idea that your fingerprints are completely unique isn't as airtight as it sounds. Yes, fingerprints are incredibly detailed. The ridges, loops, and whorls formed in the womb are shaped by genetics and environment, creating patterns that are very unlikely to repeat. But very unlikely is not the same as impossible. The claim that no two fingerprints have ever been alike across all of history is more belief than proof. There is no scientific study that has examined every fingerprint on Earth. In fact, fingerprint analysis has come under scrutiny in recent years. While it's still a useful tool, forensic experts now admit that it's not infallible. There have been documented cases where fingerprint evidence led to wrongful arrests and convictions, later overturned by DNA. This doesn't mean fingerprints are useless, just that they aren't perfect. Even identical twins who share the same DNA have different fingerprints, but not wildly different. Their prints often share enough features to make them harder to tell apart than most people realize. And in massive populations, the chance of partial fingerprint matches increases. So while your fingerprints are highly distinctive, calling them completely unique is a stretch. It's a myth born from confidence in early forensic science, and it stuck because it sounded definitive. But science rarely deals in absolutes. Fingerprint technology is still valuable, just not flawless. It's one piece of the puzzle, not a golden key. And like most things that seem too certain, completely unique turns out to be a bit of a myth. Men think about sex every 7 seconds. The claim that men think about sex every 7 seconds shows up everywhere, from casual conversations to headlines. It paints a picture of a brain constantly hijacked by desire, but there's no science behind that number. The every 7 seconds claim has been repeated for decades, yet there's no original study or data to back it up. It likely started as a throwaway comment, then turned into a widely accepted fact. When researchers actually set out to test how often people think about sex, the numbers turned out to be much lower and far more reasonable. In one well-known study, college-aged men reported thinking about sex roughly 19 times a day on average. That's still more than women in the same study, but nowhere near once every 7 seconds. In the same study, men also thought about food and sleep almost as often as they did about sex, suggesting that basic needs and desires compete for mental space. The myth also exaggerates how the human mind works. Thoughts are spontaneous and influenced by surroundings, mood, and individual differences. No brain operates on a fixed schedule, especially not one that triggers a specific thought hundreds of times per hour. And while men, on average, may think about sex more often than women, the gap isn't as wide as people assume, and it varies from person to person. Culture, personality, and life experience all play a role. So the idea that men are wired to think about sex every few seconds isn't just unsupported, it's misleading. Real data shows that sexual thoughts happen regularly, but they're only one part of a much bigger mental picture. The 7-second myth survives because it's catchy, not because it's true. Coffee stunts your growth. For years, kids have been warned that drinking coffee will stunt their growth. It's one of those classic lines, right up there with "sit up straight" or "don't run with scissors." But despite how often it's said, there's no scientific evidence to support it. Coffee contains caffeine, a natural stimulant that affects the central nervous system. It can make you feel more alert, increase heart rate, and temporarily reduce tiredness. But it doesn't interfere with the growth plates in bones or stop the body from developing normally. Growth is mainly influenced by genetics, nutrition, sleep, and overall health, not by whether someone drinks coffee. The myth likely started decades ago when some early studies linked caffeine to lower bone density. But those studies didn't tell the whole story. Later research showed that the real issue wasn't the caffeine itself. It was that people who drank more caffeine often got less calcium in their diets. Calcium is important for building strong bones, especially in children and teens. But caffeine doesn't block growth. At most, it has a very mild effect on how the body handles calcium, and even that can be offset by getting enough from food or supplements. That's why coffee isn't off limits for growing teens. It just needs to be part of a balanced diet. Of course, too much caffeine can still cause problems like jitteriness, poor sleep, or upset stomachs, especially in younger people. But that's a short-term effect, not a long-term growth issue. In short, coffee isn't a growth blocker. It's just a drink with a strong reputation and a few misunderstood side effects. As long as it's consumed in moderation, it won't make you any shorter. It just might keep you up a little later. Multitasking makes you more productive. juggling emails while sitting in a meeting, writing a report with music blasting, checking your phone in between tasks. Multitasking feels like a smart way to get more done, but it's not as productive as it seems. The human brain isn't built to focus on multiple complex tasks at once. What we call multitasking is actually just rapid task switching. Your attention flips back and forth, and each switch comes with a mental cost. You lose time and efficiency every time your brain resets to refocus. Simple activities like folding laundry while listening to a podcast are different. Those use different parts of the brain and don't compete for the same type of focus. But when you're trying to do two things that both require active thinking, like writing an email and responding to a message, you're not doing both at the same time. You're switching between them over and over, and the quality of both tasks usually drops. Studies have shown that frequent multitaskers often perform worse on tasks that require memory, concentration, or problem solving. They're more prone to errors and take longer to finish their work. And despite this, many still feel like they're being more productive because they're constantly doing something, even if it's not efficient. There's also something called attention residue. That's when a bit of your focus stays stuck on the previous task, even after you've moved on. It slows you down and makes deep focus harder to maintain. Single tasking, focusing on one thing at a time, might feel slower, but it's often faster in the long run. It allows for better concentration, fewer mistakes, and less mental fatigue. Multitasking may look like productivity, but more often it's just busyness in disguise. Your brain works better when it gets to finish one thing before starting another. You can catch up on lost sleep. After a late night or a week of poor sleep, it's tempting to believe you can just catch up over the weekend. Sleep in for a few extra hours and everything balances out. But that's not exactly how sleep works. Sleep isn't stored like money in a bank. You can't save it up in advance, and you can't fully pay off a running sleep debt by simply sleeping more later. Missing sleep takes a toll on your body and brain, one that's not always easy to reverse. When you don't get enough rest, the effects start quickly. Reaction times slow down, focus fades, and memory becomes less reliable. Over time, chronic sleep loss can increase the risk of heart disease, diabetes, and depression. While 1 or 2 nights of short sleep can often be recovered from with a longer rest, consistent sleep deprivation leads to deeper disruptions in your internal systems, especially your circadian rhythm, which keeps your body clock in sync. If you sleep 5 or 6 hours a night all week and then try to make up for it by sleeping 10 hours on Saturday, your body might feel slightly better, but your sleep quality and alertness may not fully return to normal. Oversleeping on the weekend can also throw off your rhythm, making it harder to fall asleep on time when the work week starts again. The most effective way to stay well rested is to get consistent, good quality sleep each night. That doesn't mean perfect sleep every time, but aiming for a steady schedule helps your body function the way it's designed to. Occasional recovery sleep is fine. It can help in the short term, but it's not a long-term solution. Regular rest is what your body actually needs. Reading more makes your eyesight worse. If you've ever worn glasses, someone has probably told you that too much reading will ruin your eyesight. It sounds like solid advice. Reading small text for hours must strain your eyes, right? But reading itself doesn't damage your vision. What it can do is temporarily tire out your eyes, especially if you're reading in poor lighting, staring at screens too long, or not taking breaks. This leads to eye strain, symptoms like blurry vision, headaches, or dryness. But none of that causes permanent damage. Once you rest your eyes, they recover. The concern about reading often comes from a link between close-up work and nearsightedness, or myopia. People with myopia can see nearby things clearly, but struggle to focus on distant objects. And while reading doesn't directly cause myopia, the connection comes from how much time someone spends focusing on things up close, especially during childhood, when the eyes are still developing. But there's another key factor: time spent not looking at distant objects. Studies have shown that kids who spend more time outdoors tend to have lower rates of myopia. That's likely because natural light and focusing on things far away give the eyes a better balance of visual activity. So while reading for hours on end might increase the risk of developing myopia in someone already predisposed, the act of reading itself doesn't wear out the eyes. What matters more is a healthy mix of visual habits: close-up work, distance viewing, good lighting, and regular breaks. Wearing glasses doesn't make your vision worse either. That's another common myth. Glasses help correct your focus. They don't weaken the eye. The real key to maintaining healthy vision isn't avoiding books. It's giving your eyes a little variety throughout the day. Alcohol kills brain cells. Alcohol doesn't exactly have a reputation for being brain-friendly. For years, people have repeated the idea that every drink you take kills off brain cells. It's a simple, scary image, but it's not quite accurate. The truth is, moderate alcohol consumption doesn't actually kill brain cells. That myth likely comes from early studies that misunderstood how alcohol affects the brain. When you drink, alcohol acts as a depressant. It slows down activity in the central nervous system, which can temporarily impair things like coordination, memory, and judgment. But those effects are mostly due to how alcohol interacts with neurotransmitters, chemical messengers in your brain, not because it's destroying neurons. Now, that doesn't mean alcohol has no impact. Chronic heavy drinking over long periods can definitely harm the brain. It can shrink certain brain regions, especially the frontal lobe, which is involved in decision-making and self-control. But again, this damage comes from long-term exposure and nutrient deficiencies, not because alcohol directly kills brain cells on contact. Another factor is how alcohol affects brain development. For teenagers and young adults, whose brains are still maturing, regular drinking can interfere with critical processes like memory formation and emotional regulation. So while it's not about killing cells outright, alcohol can still disrupt how the brain grows and functions. In extreme cases, alcohol abuse can lead to conditions like Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, often called wet brain, which is tied to a lack of vitamin B1. This condition involves serious memory problems. But even here, it's not that cells are being killed by alcohol alone. It's a combination of poor nutrition and prolonged misuse. So, while the image of alcohol zapping brain cells might be catchy, the reality is more about interference than destruction. Moderate drinking doesn't kill neurons, but that doesn't mean it's harmless either. All bees die after stinging. It's a common belief that all bees die after they sting. The idea makes bee stings sound like a last resort, one final act of defense. But that only tells part of the story. The truth is, some bees die after stinging, but not all. This reaction is mostly limited to honeybees, and even then, only the workers. When a honeybee stings a person or other mammal, its stinger, barbed like a tiny harpoon, gets stuck in the skin. As the bee pulls away, the stinger tears from its body, along with part of its abdomen. That injury is fatal, but this only happens because mammal skin is thick and elastic. If a honeybee stings another insect, like a wasp or another bee, the stinger often doesn't get stuck. In those cases, the bee can sting and survive. So even within honeybees, death isn't guaranteed after every sting. And then there are other types of bees. Bumblebees, for example, have smooth stingers and can sting multiple times without harm. Same goes for many solitary bees, like carpenter bees. These species don't lose their stingers and have no problem defending themselves more than once. The confusion likely comes from how familiar honeybees are to most people. They're the ones we see in gardens and learn about in school, so their behavior tends to get generalized. But the world of bees is far more diverse. There are over 20,000 species of bees, and their stinging behavior varies widely. So while the sting and die rule applies to certain bees in specific situations, it's far from universal. Most bees aren't on a one-sting limit. They're more flexible, and in many cases, better equipped to defend themselves again if they need to. Napping is lazy. For a long time, napping has carried a bad reputation. It's often seen as a sign of laziness or a lack of discipline, as if anyone taking a break in the middle of the day must be avoiding real work. But that perception doesn't match what science knows about sleep. Napping isn't a sign of weakness. It's a natural part of how the body manages energy. Many people experience a dip in alertness during the early afternoon, even if they've had a full night's sleep. This drop in energy is built into our biology, not a sign of poor work ethic. Short naps, especially those lasting 10 to 30 minutes, have been shown to improve memory, focus, and mood. NASA even studied the effects of naps on pilots and found that a brief rest increased alertness and performance. These benefits happen because sleep isn't just about duration. It's also about timing and brain recovery. Longer naps, those that last an hour or more, can leave people feeling groggy afterward, but even these can help with learning and problem solving if timed properly. The key is understanding how different stages of sleep affect the body and using naps to restore energy, not replace a full night's rest. In some cultures, daytime napping is completely normal. The siesta in Spain or afternoon rests in parts of Asia are woven into daily routines. It's only in fast-paced work environments, especially in Western countries, that napping has become associated with slacking off. But taking a nap doesn't mean you're falling behind. It can actually mean you're giving your brain the reset it needs to keep going. When used correctly, napping isn't lazy. It's smart energy management backed by decades of research. Starving a fever helps you heal. Starve a fever, feed a cold. It's one of the most commonly repeated pieces of home health advice. But despite how familiar it sounds, the idea that you should avoid eating to recover from a fever doesn't hold up to medical evidence. A fever is your body's way of fighting off infection. When your temperature rises, it makes it harder for viruses and bacteria to survive. At the same time, your immune system becomes more active. That response takes energy, and your body gets that energy from nutrients in food. Starving yourself during a fever doesn't speed up recovery. In fact, it can do the opposite. When your body is already under stress, depriving it of calories, vitamins, and fluids can weaken your immune response and make it harder to bounce back. While it's normal to have a reduced appetite when you're sick, it's still important to eat what you can, especially foods that are easy to digest, like soups, toast, or fruit. Staying hydrated is even more critical. Fevers cause your body to lose fluids through sweat, and dehydration can make symptoms worse. Water, broth, or electrolyte drinks help keep your system balanced while your body works to recover. The starve a fever idea may have started centuries ago, when people didn't understand how illness worked and feared that eating would somehow feed the disease. But modern research shows that fueling the body appropriately, without overdoing it, supports the healing process. There's no special rule for feeding or starving different illnesses. What matters most is listening to your body and giving it what it needs: rest, hydration, and nourishment. A fever signals that your immune system is working. Giving it energy and support is part of helping it do the job right. If you touch a frog, you'll get warts. For generations, kids have been told not to touch frogs, or they'll get warts. It's the kind of warning that sounds believable, especially when looking at a bumpy toad. But warts don't come from frogs. They come from a virus. Warts are caused by the human papillomavirus, or HPV. It's a group of viruses that infect the top layer of human skin, often entering through tiny cuts or breaks. Once inside, the virus triggers the skin cells to grow faster, forming a rough, raised bump, a wart. It spreads through direct contact with infected skin or surfaces, not through animals. Frogs and toads may have lumpy, wart-like bumps on their skin, but those are natural parts of their bodies. They're not contagious. In fact, those bumps help protect them by secreting mild toxins that discourage predators. It's part of their defense system, not a sign of disease. This myth probably stuck around because of how frogs and toads look. Their skin appears bumpy, moist, and strange compared to most animals. That unfamiliar texture got associated with something humans consider unpleasant: warts. It became a simple visual shortcut that made sense at the time, even though it's not true. Touching a frog won't give you a skin infection, but it's still smart to wash your hands afterward. Not because of warts, but because frogs can carry bacteria like salmonella. It's also good for the frog. Handling them too much can stress them out or damage their sensitive skin. So while they might not be cuddly, frogs aren't spreading warts. They're just misunderstood. What gives you warts is a virus passed between humans, not a cold, bumpy toad hopping through the yard.